Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with the mighty Jingles, and today's video is, well, it's sort of a public service announcement. A number of you have been getting very excited about the news that World of Warships are planning to introduce a brand new Tier 9 and 10 destroyer into the Japanese gunboat destroyer line that currently ends with the Akazuki at Tier 8. Now, I'm sure we've all seen YouTube videos of Akazukis tearing it around various different maps, unleashing a volume of fire from its rapid-firing 8 100mm guns that would make an Atlanta just look like it was trying too hard. And a well-played Akazuki is something to be genuinely afraid of, but what you may not realise from watching various different YouTube videos is exactly how much you have to invest in an Akazuki before it can even begin to approach the kind of performance levels that you may have seen from watching Akazuki videos on YouTube. And so, well, that's basically what today's video is going to be about. I understand that people are going to be quite excited about getting the Akazuki at Tier 8, the Kitakaze at Tier 9 and the Harugamo at Tier 10 when they become available. And I don't want to discourage people from doing that, but if that's your plan, there are a couple of things that you should be aware of first. Of all of the Tier 8 destroyers, well, the Loyang will do 38 knots, the Kiev will do 42.5 knots, the Z-23 37 knots, the Benson 38 knots, the Kid 39.9 knots, the Asashio relatively slow at 35 knots, the Harakaze 37.3 knots, the Kagero 36.6 knots, the Akazuki, even with the Sierra Mike flag for an extra 5% speed, will only do 34.6 knots. It is by a comfortable margin, or perhaps that should be a very uncomfortable margin, the slowest of the Tier 8 destroyers. Next, Concealment, and it's more bad news here, I'm afraid. The Akazuki is at least Tier 8, so it has access to the Concealment System Modification 1, which reduces the detectability range of your ship by 10%. But assuming all other Tier 8 destroyers have this concealment system fitted, the Akazuki's surface detection range is 6.6 kilometers. The Kagero has 6 kilometers. The Asashio also has 6.6 kilometers, and this is assuming none of them have a 10-point captain with the Concealment Expert skill. The Harakaze has 6 kilometers, so the Akazuki is the least stealthy of the Japanese Tier 8 destroyers. It's also less stealthy than the USS Kid, which has a 6.4 kilometer surface detection range. It's more stealthy than the Benson, which has 7.4 kilometers. It's obviously more stealthy than the Kiev, which has a colossal 7.9 kilometers. It's just a little bit better than the Z-23 with 6.9 kilometers. And it's not even as good as the Loyang with a 6.4 kilometer surface detection range. So you've got two factors here that don't go particularly well together. You've got a mediocre surface detection range, which means you're probably going to be spotted first, all other things being equal, by an enemy destroyer, and that enemy destroyer is always going to be faster than you, which makes it very, very difficult for you to run away. Often your best option in an Akazuki when faced with these kind of circumstances is simply to turn around and obliterate the enemy destroyer. And the Akazuki can be very, very good at doing just that. It has 8 100mm guns with a blisteringly fast 3-second reload and lightning quick turning turrets. And these 100mm guns are the Akazuki's biggest strength, but they're also its biggest weakness. And I'm going to show you exactly why. Now, I suspect there are probably a lot of you out there who are already aware of what it is I'm about to say, or what it is I'm about to demonstrate. If that's the case, then stick around because I will be putting all of this into practice later on in a random battle. But first we're going into a training room where I've set up a number of targets, specifically chosen to illustrate the weaknesses of the Akazuki if you do not have a 10-point captain on this ship with the inertia fuse high explosive shell skill. And it's this 10-point captain skill, perhaps over and above every other factor, which is going to determine whether or not the Akazuki is going to be fun and effective to play, or incredibly frustrating if you don't understand high explosive penetration mechanics. I'm going to try to keep it simple. I'm firing high explosive at a Cleveland. This is, at the moment, a tier 6 cruiser, although pretty soon it's going to be a tier 8 cruiser. As you can see, my 100mm shells are pretty much always doing damage to the Cleveland. Every now and then I get a shatter when I hit a gun turret, for example, but more or less every shot I'm firing is doing some damage. There's a number here that's very, very important, and that number is 16. 16mm of armour. The Cleveland, as a tier 6 cruiser, has 13mm of superstructure armour, but it has 16mm of bow and stern plating and midships plating. If you take the caliber of the Akazuki's guns, which is 100mm, and you divide it by 6, this gives you the amount of armour that a high explosive 100mm shell can penetrate without shattering. 100 divided by 6 is 16.6. You round that up, you get 17. That means the Akazuki shells firing high explosive without the 10-point captain IFHE skill can and will penetrate 16mm of armour. So that's bad news for tier 6 cruisers. But the Akazuki's a tier 8 destroyer. It's not going to see too many tier 6 cruisers. How about something else? How about a tier 8 cruiser? Oh look, there's the Charles Martel, a tier 8 cruiser. Tier 8, 9 and 10 cruisers, with the exception of British light cruisers, but they're a special case, have 25mm of bow, stern and midships armour plating. And 16mm, it's that number 16 again, of superstructure armour. This means that the Akazuki's 100mm guns without the IFHE 10-point captain skill can only damage a tier 8, 9 or 10 cruiser if you hit it in the superstructure. High explosive shells that impact anywhere else, such as the bow plating, will just shatter. They may start a fire, even if they shatter, but they won't do any direct damage. Your armour piercing, of course, can absolutely penetrate 23mm of plating, but if it strikes at an angle, armour piercing can bounce. So you pretty much have to have the broadside of a target to shoot at in order to guarantee you're going to do any damage with the armour piercing. We're going to finish off the Charles Martel with the torpedoes and then turn our attention to a tier 8 battleship, like the Amagi. Tier 8, 9 and 10 battleships tend to have 32mm of bow, stern and deck plating, which means none of these high explosive shells are going to do any damage. We can't do any damage to the turrets, although even if we shatter we may be lucky enough to start a fire. How about the superstructure? Surely we can at least damage the funnel with a 100mm high explosive. No, we can't, because tier 8, 9 and 10 battleships have 19mm of superstructure armour. There is literally nowhere on a tier 8, 9 or 10 battleship that you can inflict any damage with a 100mm high explosive shell. There are certainly places you can penetrate with 100mm armour piercing, like that, but again, armour piercing can bounce unless you pretty much have the broadside of the ship to shoot at. And I wouldn't be too confident about starting fires with the Akazuki either. It's true that even a high explosive shatter that does no damage can start a fire, and I have been incredibly lucky in that I've managed to start a couple of fires on this Amagi, but the Akazuki's base fire starting chance with its shells is only 5% in the first place, so I wouldn't be too confident about finishing off battleships by setting them on fire. Well, we're going to finish off the Amagi with torpedoes. And then I'm going to show you something that might come as a significant surprise. How about another tier 8, 9 or 10 destroyer? Like that Benson over there. I mean, this is a no-brainer, right? You spot a destroyer, you fire high explosive at it. Yeah, not in the Akazuki you don't. Tier 8, 9 and 10 destroyers have 19mm of midships, bow and stern plating. If the Akazuki is firing high explosive and you don't have a 10-point captain with the IFHE skill, the only place you can damage a same or higher tier destroyer with high explosive is if you hit it in the superstructure, which only has 13mm of armour. Observe what happens to a tier 8, 9 or 10 destroyer when it's hit by 100mm high explosive. Pretty much nothing. By some miracle I was actually able to knock that Benson's engine out. Presumably the shockwave from the high explosive shatters penetrated the engine spaces. Armour piercing, of course, can and will do damage. it's only 19 millimeters of armor, but unless you hit the superstructure of a same or higher tier destroyer with your high explosive shells, they're pretty much just going to laugh at you. If you want to do any kind of damage to a same or higher tier destroyer, you have to fire the armor piercing. And 100mm armor piercing isn't going to overmatch anything, so they pretty much have to be broadside on to you. Otherwise your armor piercing is going to bounce. So there's that. On the other hand, if you come across a tier 7 or 6 destroyer, like that Farragut for example, you can do pretty much as you do in every other destroyer that isn't the Akazuki. Load the high explosive and just disengage your brain. So why is it that this inertia fuse high explosive skill is so important for the Akazuki? What it does, as well as dropping your fire starting chance by 3%, which drops the Akazuki's already pitiful 5% chance down to 2%, but it also gives your high explosive shells an extra 30% of penetration. And on the Akazuki, that's an extra 5mm. And that gives the Akazuki's guns 21mm of high explosive penetration, which means you can fire high explosive and do damage to any other tier 8, 9 or 10 destroyer. You can fire high explosive and do damage to any tier 7 or 6 cruiser. You still have to hit the superstructure of any tier 8, 9 or 10 cruiser, with the exception of some of the British cruisers. Again, they're a special case. And you still have to hit the superstructure of any battleship that you're ever going to face, tier 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. So what does this actually mean in practice? Well, if, like me, you're taking the Akazuki into battle for the very first time, and you only have a 6-point captain, which means you do not have that inertia fuse high explosive shell skill, you have to know what you're shooting at, and what you can actually penetrate with the ammunition that you have selected. You have to actually think about what you're doing. You can't just load the high explosive and disengage your brain in the way that you can with just about every other destroyer in the game. But Jingles, if you carefully manage your ammunition choice in other destroyers, you can do a lot more damage if you fire armor piercing at the right times. Yes, absolutely 100% true. But the point here is, if you make careful use of your ammunition selection in other destroyers, you can do a lot more damage. If you don't make careful use of your ammunition selection in this destroyer, you won't do any damage. You have to think a lot more in the Akazuki, and it's not just because of the low caliber of the guns. Remember, you're also the slowest tier 8 destroyer in the game, and your surface detection range isn't particularly good either. Even if you have a 10-point captain, you're probably going to want to pick that IFHE skill first, which means faced with contesting a cap against another destroyer with a 10-point captain, they're almost certainly going to have the concealment expert skill. So they're going to see you first. And they're going to be faster than you. So they're going to see you first, and you're not going to be able to run away from them. Which makes rushing caps in the Akazuki particularly perilous. Spotted. Enemy destroyer is in the cap. He's actually popped up on the map, but I'm not paying attention, and I haven't actually spotted him until he starts shooting at me. Okay, here's the Akazuki decision-making process in action. What is it? A destroyer. It's a Gnevny. What tier is that? It's tier 6. Load the high explosive. I can penetrate him with high explosive. Of course, he can penetrate me as well. And it's not so much him as all of his friends that are probably going to be the problem, because they're pretty much all shooting at me, and there are aircraft overhead, and here come the Gnevny's torpedoes. Okay. Right, I'm going to beach here, and I'm going to smoke up, because that's a lot of ships shooting at me. Everybody's contesting this cap. It means I'm not going to be able to kill the Gnevny, but, well, it's more important that he doesn't kill me. Right. Avoided his torpedoes, no problem. But I'm burning. And, yeah, pretty much everything is damaged. My steering, my engine. The fire's going to be out soon, but I've already lost a lot of health. Can I torpedo the Auber? Yes, probably. Actually, no, I'm not going to need to. Okay. Now, the Akazuki does have torpedoes, but it only has one launcher. However, it's one of the very few destroyers in the game that doesn't make you choose between a torpedo reload booster, which allows me to fire my torpedoes again almost immediately, and a smokescreen. The Akazuki gets both. So that is a very, very good thing. I'm emptying my torpedoes into the smokescreen. And then I'm getting the hell out of here. There's just far too many enemy ships interested in this cap circle, and I do not have enough health left. I need to be very careful that I do not get spotted as I make my exit, however, so I'm going to creep around the side of this island, keeping my smoke screen between myself and anything that's likely to want to shoot at me. And I should be able to get out of danger without being spotted. Yep. We're good. Torpedoes didn't hit anything though. I'll still have a minute to go before my torpedoes are reloaded, and I've got 3 minutes before I can use the torpedo reload booster again. Aha. Well, I can damage that Nelson, but I don't want to shoot yet. I'll have to hit him in the superstructure with my high explosive, but I'm going to wait until this island is blocking line of sight between me and him, which should allow me, with the very fast reload of these guns, to get at least 3 salvos off and hopefully get some damage done on the Nelson. One more salvo? No, let's not risk it. I don't want to get spotted with this little health remaining. The reason I'm putting this video up is not just because of the complications that you're going to face if you're sailing the Akazuki for the first time, although that in and of itself would have been a good enough reason, but also because Wargaming have announced that they're going to be continuing the Akazuki Japanese gunboat destroyer line at tier 9 and 10 with the Kitakami and the Harugumo. And they also are going to be armed with 100mm guns. In the case of the Harugumo at tier 10, it's going to have an extra turret, so 10 100mm guns. But the Harugumo is probably going to suffer from the Akazuki's problems to an even greater extent, because it's tier 10. In the Akazuki, if I at least come across a tier 6 or 7 destroyer, I can just disengage the brain and load the high explosive, but you're never going to have that luxury in the Harugumo, because it's never going to see tier 6 or 7 destroyers. Oh, come on, oh, never mind. I was going to try to drop my smoke screen and cover that Queen Elizabeth, but, well, didn't have time. Those torpedoes on the Bismarck are looking pretty good, though. I might get lucky and hit him with 2. No, it's just going to be 1. It did cause flooding, however. And he has immediately damage controlled that, which makes perfect sense. What you want to do here, of course, is follow that up with some high explosive shells, set him on fire, and give him a nice permanent fire to worry about when his damage control's on cooldown. The problem here is that without that IFHE skill, I cannot do any damage whatsoever to that Bismarck, even hitting him in the superstructure with my high explosive shells. My armor piercing could damage his superstructure, but it's not going to set any fires, and fires are what I want. I have a base 5% fire chance. I don't have the IFHE skill, so it's still 5%, not 2%. And I'm running 2 signal flags, which make that a base 6%. But that's still not a great chance of setting a fire. And I may be in the Bismarck's secondary gun battery range, and I'm certainly within the shooting range of all of those enemy ships slightly further to the north. So this is not actually a very good idea at all. Just look at all the shatters. 0 damage from multiple hits. All because I don't have the IFHE skill. And yep, I have been noticed, and I am immediately starting to attract attention. So that was not the best idea that I ever had. The potential rewards were just far too slim to justify taking any kind of damage and exposing my position in this kind of situation. Right, what can I do? What's the best use of my Akazuki right now? The scores are fairly even. We could use another cap point, and Bravo is right up ahead. Now, there's a smoke screen over there, and it ain't one of ours. They only have 1 destroyer left, that's good. The bad news is, it's a Benson, it's tier 8. So I can only reliably damage him with armor piercing. The torpedo reload booster is back up, so I'm going to scatter some torpedoes liberally around that smoke screen. That's not one of our smoke screens. I'm being joined by a Z-23. Oh, wait, sorry. Jingles moment. It's not a Z-23, it's a Mars. Okay. 2 of us in this cap circle against the 1 Benson. Now, remember, the Benson's a tier 8 destroyer. If I'm firing high explosive, I can't penetrate him and do damage anywhere in his hull. He has 19mm of hull plating. The only place I can damage a Benson or any other tier 8 destroyer with high explosive is in the superstructure, so I've loaded the armor piercing. Even then, the Benson's going to have to give me pretty much the broadside of the ship to shoot at, or my armour piercing is likely to bounce. Took a speculative shot just around the side of the island in case he was lurking there, and no. Okay, the Mars is dropping a smoke screen. My smoke screen's ready to go as well, but I may as well use his smoke screen. He's obviously been spotted, he's been hit, he's firing his torpedoes off. I think he's launched his torpedoes against that Hipper over there. It's a Tier 8 cruiser. He, of course, has hydroacoustic search, and it's probably running, so he's probably going to see the torpedoes coming, but he's too far away to actually detect me or the Mars in our smoke screen. And now that I'm in the cover of the smoke screen, I have to fire armor piercing because it's a Tier 8 cruiser, but I can actually do some damage to the Hipper. And the Hipper is down. And there's the Benson. Now, is the Benson aware that there are two of us in this smoke screen? Probably not. Is he going to try to launch torpedoes into the smoke screen? Very probably. That means he's going to have to show me the broadside of the ship, and that's exactly what I need with these 100mm armor-piercing shells. Got him. There's my first kill. Even better, I was far enough away that I managed to kill him without being detected from firing within the smoke screen. Speaking of which, smoke screen's about to die, but that's okay. Mine is ready to go. Ah. Well, that's actually not terrible news for a number of reasons. I mean, it's terrible news for the Mars because the Fiji knows he's there, but he still doesn't know I'm here, at least until he pops his hydroacoustic search in order to finish the Mars off, and now he realises he actually has two problems. And because it's a British Tier 7 light cruiser with very poor armour, I could penetrate him everywhere other than midships with my high explosive. But I don't need to switch to high explosive because he very obligingly turns all the way around, showing the broadside of the ship, which I can penetrate everywhere with armour piercing, in order to get his torpedoes away. So that's kill number 2. Bad news for the Fiji, unfortunately. Bad news for the Mars as well. But the Fiji's down, and providing I can avoid getting hit by anything, I am still detected because I was firing the guns in open water. And I think the Normandy to the south and possibly also the Bayern can see me, and I probably... There it is! But now I'm no longer detected, and I can finish capping Bravo. And it looks like somebody's capping Alpha as well. Well, somebody has capped Alpha. I'm capping Bravo. What are you talking about, Jingles? Okay, there we go. Now, we hold all 4 of the capture circles. There are only 3 enemy ships left. We've got a very convincing points lead, and it's difficult to see how we could actually lose this game at this point. So, while I'm looking for a few more targets to farm a little bit more damage on with the armour piercing, because they're all battleships, and pad my stats before this match ends, I hope I've been able to demonstrate exactly why, if you're looking at the Akazuki, and by extension the forthcoming Kitakaze and Harugumo at Tier 9 and 10, and thinking, Japanese gunboat destroyers, it's important that you know exactly what you're getting yourself into, because without a 10-point captain, you really do have to exercise a lot more thought than a typical destroyer captain does when it comes to selecting the ammunition that you're going to be firing, and the type of target, and the tier of target that you're going to be firing that ammunition at. Even if you do have a 10-point captain, you're going to want to pick that IFHE skill first, because it just makes the decision-making process when you're actually playing the ship so much less complicated. But that means that you're not going to have enough points until you have a 14-point captain to also have the Concealment expert skill. The Akazuki at Tier 8, and by extension the Kitakaze at Tier 9 and the Harugumo at Tier 10, because they have the same caliber main armament, and so they're going to suffer from exactly the same problems, are heavily dependent on having a skilled captain in order to realise the full potential of the ships. Without a 10-point captain, the Akazuki is a deeply mediocre ship to play. Well, that's not strictly fair. It's still a fairly good ship, but it's a very complicated ship to play. With a 10-point captain and the IFHE skill, it's less complicated. With a 14-point captain and the Concealment expert skill to go with it, this ship is absolutely fantastic. But it's important that you understand what you're getting into before you make the plunge and start spending all of your experience on unlocking the Akazuki and stockpiling experience for the Kitakaze and the Harugumo. And that's why I've done today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.